Most people think of ancient humans as strong, fast, and young. They imagine hunters running after animals, warriors fighting for survival, and young women gathering food in the forest. That picture is not wrong, but it is incomplete, because ancient humans also got old. Their hair turned gray, their joints ached, their eyes became weak, their teeth wore down. And when that happened, something had to be done about it. For a long time, scientists assumed the answer was simple and brutal. Old people could not hunt. Old people could not run. So old people were left behind. That was the assumption for decades. It made logical sense on paper. But the bones told a different story. When archaeologists dig up ancient burial sites, they find something surprising. They find old people. Not just adults in their 30s. Not just young warriors. They find people who lived into their 50s, 60s, and in some cases even their 70s. This matters more than it sounds. Living to 60 or 70 in the ancient world was not easy. It meant surviving disease, injury, starvation, extreme cold, and constant physical hardship. If someone made it to old age, they did not do it alone. Someone helped them. One of the most important discoveries came from a site called Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq. Archaeologists found the skeleton of a Neanderthal man who had lived between 45 and 50 years old. That was old for his time. That was old for his time. His right arm had been so severely injured that it had become completely useless. His eye socket showed evidence of a blow that likely left him partially blind. He had arthritis in his legs and feet. This man could not hunt. He could not fight. He could barely walk without pain. And yet he lived for years in that condition. Someone fed him. Someone kept him warm. Someone made sure he did not die alone in a ditch. His tribe took care of him. In ancient times, most people did not live long enough to experience what we call old age today. Infections that we cure with a simple pill could kill a young person in days. Childbirth was dangerous. Hunting accidents were common. A broken leg could become a death sentence. Because of this, reaching the age of 40 or 50 was itself an achievement. Not everyone made it, but those who did were not automatically discarded. Scientists who study ancient bones can tell a great deal about how old a person was when they died. They look at the wear on the teeth, the density of the bones, the condition of the joints. When they find skeletons of genuinely old individuals, they also look for signs of what that person's life was like in their final years. What they often find is evidence of long-term care. Healed bones that would have required weeks of rest to recover. Teeth so worn down that chewing hard food was impossible, which means someone was preparing softer food for that person. Joints so damaged by arthritis that independent movement would have been extremely difficult. These are not the bones of people who were abandoned. These are the bones of people who were looked after. Being old in an ancient tribe did not just mean being weak and dependent. It also meant something else entirely. It meant knowing things that younger people did not know. Think about what an elder in a hunter-gatherer tribe would have experienced over 50 or 60 years of life. They would have seen droughts that lasted 3 years. They would have remembered which roots were safe to eat when the normal food supply ran out. They would have watched entire animal migrations and knew which direction the herds moved in which season. They would have seen diseases come and go and remembered which plants seemed to help and which ones made things worse. This knowledge was not written down anywhere. There were no books. There were no maps. There were no records of any kind. The only place this knowledge existed was inside the heads of the people who had lived long enough to gather it. An elder was a living library. Researchers who study modern hunter-gatherer tribes, the few that still exist in remote parts of the world, have found that elders play a crucial role in survival. During times of food shortage, it is often the oldest members of the group who remember where hidden water sources are, or which unusual plants can be eaten in desperate times. Their memories have saved entire communities. The same would have been true tens of thousands of years ago. An elder who remembered the last great drought was not a burden. That elder was potentially the most important person in the group. There is a theory in anthropology called the grandmother hypothesis. It was developed in the 1990s and it attempts to explain something unusual about human beings. Most animals in nature do not live long past their reproductive years. When a female animal can no longer have offspring, her body tends to deteriorate quickly and she dies. There is, from a purely biological standpoint, no reason for her to keep living if she cannot produce more young. But human women are different. Human women can live for decades after they stop being able to have children. A woman might stop having babies in her 40s but live until her 70s or 80s. Why would nature allow this? The grandmother hypothesis says the answer is simple. Grandmothers help their grandchildren survive. A young mother in the ancient world had her hands completely full. She was feeding an infant, staying close to keep it safe, and trying to recover her own strength. She could not always gather enough food for herself and her older children at the same time. But a grandmother could. A grandmother who was past her own childbearing years had no infant of her own to look after. She had time and energy to gather food for her grandchildren. She could watch the older children while the young mother rested. She could teach the children skills that took years to learn. Studies of historical records from early human settlements show that children were significantly more likely to survive when their maternal grandmother was alive and present. The grandmother's existence directly improved the survival chances of the next generation. This means that old age in women was not just tolerated by ancient human groups. It was useful, possibly essential. Evolution may have actually selected for longer female lifespans because grandmothers helped the tribe survive. Not every ancient culture treated its elderly with the same care. The honest answer is that circumstances mattered enormously. When food was plentiful and the tribe was settled and safe, caring for elderly members was manageable. But when resources became desperately scarce, when the tribe was being chased by enemies or moving through famine conditions, the calculus changed. There is archaeological and historical evidence of what some researchers call elder abandonment. In extreme survival situations, some ancient groups left their oldest and weakest members behind when they had to move quickly. This was not done casually or without grief. But survival sometimes forced impossible choices. Some researchers have found evidence of this in the skeletal record. Bodies of old individuals found in places that suggest they were left rather than buried. Bones that show signs of dying alone rather than within a community. But these cases appear to be the exception, not the rule. The majority of evidence points toward care rather than abandonment as the normal practice in ancient human groups. Even in harsh conditions, most tribes seem to have found ways to bring their elderly members along. Old people were carried when they could not walk. They were given the warmest spot by the fire. They were fed first when food was limited, at least in some cultures, because their knowledge was considered too valuable to lose. Ancient humans did not have doctors in the modern sense. But they were not helpless either. Over thousands of years of observation and trial and error, they built up a significant knowledge of natural medicine. For elderly people, this knowledge was particularly important. Old joints that ached with arthritis were treated with heat and with plant-based remedies. We know this because traces of specific medicinal plants have been found in ancient burial sites. Someone placed those plants there deliberately. Dental problems were common in old age, as teeth wore down from a lifetime of chewing tough food. Ancient people responded by preparing softer foods for those who could no longer chew properly. Bones found in ancient sites show that old individuals with severely worn teeth were still getting adequate nutrition, which means their food was being prepared differently for them. There is even evidence of ancient surgery. Skulls have been found with holes drilled into them, a procedure called trepanation, and the bone around these holes shows signs of healing. This means the patient survived the operation. Some of these skulls belong to older individuals, which means ancient humans were willing to perform risky medical procedures on elderly people. They considered it worth the effort. One of the clearest signs that ancient humans valued their elderly is found in how they buried them. For most of human prehistory, burial itself was not common. Bodies were left where people died or disposed of in ways that left no trace. The decision to bury someone carefully was itself a significant act. It required effort. It required time. It required the community to stop what they were doing and attend to the dead. When archaeologists find ancient burials, they often find signs of ceremony. Bodies arranged in specific positions. Objects placed alongside the dead. Traces of pigment, particularly red ochre, which seems to have had ritual significance across many ancient cultures worldwide. And old people are buried this way too. Not just young warriors or important leaders. Old men and old women with worn joints and ground-down teeth and healed injuries are found in burial sites with the same care given to anyone else. Sometimes more care. At one site in Russia, a burial was found that contained an elderly man placed carefully in the ground with thousands of ivory beads, fox teeth ornaments, and carefully carved objects. The preparation of this burial would have taken considerable time and effort. His community clearly considered him important enough to honor in death. The picture that emerges from all of this evidence is not the brutal, every man for himself world that people often imagine when they think about prehistoric life. Ancient humans lived in tight communities where survival depended on cooperation. They hunted together, gathered together, raised children together, and faced dangers together. Within these communities, every member had value. The strong protected the weak. The young learned from the old. The healthy cared for the sick. Old age was not easy in the ancient world. It never has been easy anywhere. But it was not a death sentence either. An old person who had survived long enough to become truly elderly had done so with the help of their community. And that community expected something in return, not labor or physical strength, but wisdom, memory, and the kind of knowledge that only comes from a long life. The elder who sat by the fire and could not hunt anymore still had a role. They watched the children. They told the stories. They remembered the last drought, the last migration, the last time this particular plant had saved lives. They were the memory of the group made flesh. We live in a world today that sometimes struggles to find value in old age. We build nursing homes and retirement communities that separate the elderly from the young. We treat aging as a problem to be managed rather than a stage of life to be respected. Ancient humans, despite their hard lives and limited resources, often did better than this. Not because they were more sentimental, not because they had more time, but because they understood something practical and true. The old ones remembered things the young ones had never seen. And in a world without books or records or any way to store information except inside a human mind, that memory was worth protecting. When ancient humans got old, many of them were cared for, respected, and valued. The bones prove it. The burials prove it. The simple fact that so many of them survived long enough to get truly old proves it. They were not left behind. They were brought along.